Hello everyone and welcome to D20 in Disguise, your source for expertise on world building, storytelling, and miniature making. So, you're the GM in the middle of a session that you've been planning for weeks, and the party is journeying through a dungeon which you've worked tirelessly on. You've tried your best to make it as eerie and horrific as possible, and now all of that preparation is being put to the test. The party is cautiously walking down a grimy dungeon corridor when suddenly a horrible beast lunges out from behind the corner, terrifying the players. Well, at least that's what you wanted to happen. In reality, the players didn't even flinch, defeated the monster, and continued on their way. Well, in today's video, I'm going to be covering how to fill your players with emotion, whether that's fear, nervousness, joy, and the list goes on and on. If you do end up enjoying today's video, then please be sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button, and don't forget that notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my uploads. But without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Welcome to D20 in Disguise. In my experience, there are three main ways to charge your GMing with emotion: exploiting your players' senses, highlighting your descriptions, and reversing expectations. Let's begin by discussing how to exploit your players' senses. Exploiting the senses is probably the easiest and most subtle way to make your players feel a specific emotion around the table. The five senses allow us humans to perceive and understand the world around us, and that is the perfect place for you to subtly and harmlessly manipulate what information your players' brains are taking in. Let's go through each of the five senses and talk about what you can do to use each of them to the fullest. Sight is the most obvious sense that you can take advantage of. Moody lighting, room decoration, and even fog can add a very eerie and tense atmosphere to the gaming room. But at the same time, you can also use lighting and decoration in your room to create a very light, cheerful, and welcoming atmosphere as well. Remember, this all depends on the mood you're going for the session. Hearing is another sense that you can heavily take advantage of during your session. For the most part, this will only be done in the forms of ambient music and sound effects, but don't underestimate the power of sound in your session. If done right, sound design can make the players feel as if they are their characters, which is a very important thing that you should definitely strive for. Smell is yet another sense that majorly impacts how we perceive the world. A dank keep smells significantly different from a grassy hillside, so try to emulate the smell of where the player's characters are actually adventuring at the current moment. For example, if the player characters are traveling through a coniferous forest, then try grabbing some heavily scented pine needles and filter their smell through the room. If you don't feel like experimenting yourself, Cantrip Candles is an amazing online business that creates scented candles specifically made for tabletop games. Some of their scents include Dungeon Depths, Adventurer's Bounty, Stone Moss Chapel, and each of them really do add a unique feel to a session. Taste is a sense that is difficult to use for your own devices, but not impossible. For example, if the player's characters are traveling through a tavern, perhaps think about maybe serving the actual players with a platter of foods that you might find in that tavern. Bread, cheese, an assortment of vegetables, maybe a few root beers. This kind of special treat can really give the players a fun break, and also doesn't break your storytelling, which is really nice. Finally, we come to touch. Touch is a sense that you can't really use in your sessions. All the players are really going to be touching are dice, the table, maybe some rule books. I guess you could adjust the temperature in your gaming room slightly, depending on where the party is, but that's kind of on the edge, and I don't know if I would consider that touch necessarily. Now that we've discussed how to use the player's senses to add a desired mood to a session, let's dive into how to highlight your descriptions so that each player around the table can have a terrifyingly accurate mental image of what you're describing. The next and most important way to add emotion and mood to your settings is to highlight your descriptions. Start by picking out the spots in your session where you want your players to feel a certain emotion. For example, perhaps you want the players to experience joy at the beginning of a session when they watch a play, but later in the session you want them to experience fear when a werewolf suddenly lunges out at them in the dark of night. Then distinguish what the source of that emotion will be. In our example, the sources of those emotions would be the play and the werewolf. From there, list a bunch of adjectives to describe those things and the emotions you want to convey with them. You're going to want to go as in-depth as possible here. Try to pick words that really evoke the desired emotion. For the werewolf, you might choose words like dark, grizzled, jagged, mindless, and fearless. Now that you have your list of adjectives describing that source of emotion, you want to have that list ready for the session. Try to fit in all of those adjectives when you're actually describing the source of emotion, the werewolf or the play. And that will really, really go a long way in leveling up your emotional storytelling. Now, let's move on to our third and final way to add feel to your sessions: reversing expectations. Reversing expectations is probably one of the most troublesome yet rewarding ways to really add mood to your sessions. This also requires a lot of prior setup, but if you're able to pull it off well, it can be really hilarious and really amazing at the same time. In a nutshell, reversing expectations makes the players expect one thing to happen, but instead, something else happens. For example, the players supposedly enter a cave that is the home of a hideous beast. But instead, when they get to the cave, the inhabitants of the cave are talking puppies that need the adventurers' help. Of course, this is an extreme example, but it does still reverse the players' expectations. At first, the players expect that they'll have to face this insane monster in a combat encounter. But it ends up that they're going to be facing these cute talking puppies in a social encounter. Furthermore, you can actually reverse the players' expectations twice in a row and still get away with it. Going back to our puppy example, let's say that the players just reached the cave and found out that the only inhabitants of the cave are these puppies. Their expectations are reversed. But then they find out that the puppies are actually hostile towards the players and can shoot lasers from their eyes. Boom! The players are thrown for a loop yet again with a second reversal. Now, do remember that this method should be used sparingly. If you reverse the players' expectations too much, they're going to catch on, and what was originally fun and surprising will just turn into metagaming, and you don't want that. And that is about it for how to evoke emotion in your players around the table. If any of you have suggestions for future videos, then please be sure to put them down in the comments. You all have a great day. Keep on creating. Stay safe. And I will see you in the next video.